Okay. Good morning, everybody. Namaste. Good morning and good evening to everybody, whoever it is coming and joining from different time zones. My name is Shreya Shakhatka. I'm a research associate at the Global Institute for Interdisciplinary Studies, and I would like to welcome you all to our second episode of our webinar series, AI and Emerging Technologies webinar series. This is our second episode, and before we move on to our webinar, I would just like to give you a brief introduction about our organization, about the webinar series, what is it about, and then I'll move on to talking about our speaker today, and then we'll give the floor to our speaker, and then we'll follow with some of the question and answer round. So this is an 1 hour webinar. So let's start with what our organization is all about. GIST, Global Institute for Interdisciplinary Studies, is an independent not-for-profit organization research institute based in Kathmandu, Nepal. GIST promotes and conducts interdisciplinary research to generate credible, salient, and legitimate knowledge that catalyzes transformative change in the development policies and practices in Nepal and elsewhere. Currently, in GIST, we have 17 research fellows, 5 research associates, and 3 interns. We've been working in different interdisciplinary fields, doing research and other works. And as a part of our work and as a part of our research initiative, AI and Emerging Technologies for Sustainable Future is a research group at GIST that aims to conduct research, development, education, and public discourse on emerging technologies such as data science, machine learning, cryptocurrency, cybersecurity, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence to generate knowledge, innovate, support, and catalyze sustainable development. And we're also looking forward to invite different speakers, researchers, practitioners from different interdisciplinary fields working with AI to start discourses and talk about this in platforms like these, and then have discourse more about the importance of AI and also bring different speakers, especially from Global South. So last week we had our first webinar where our speaker, Professor Bertman Bruce, currently a professor at Emeritus in the Information Science at University of Illinois, talked about intelligence, artificial and natural for sustainable future. And today, we're very excited to welcome our guest speaker, Professor Dr. Manoj Karki, to talk on AI and robotics in production agriculture, global perspective and local context. Before I hand over the floor to him, I just would like to give a brief introduction about him and what this webinar is about. Dr. Manoj Karki is an associate professor in the Biological Systems Engineering Department at the Washington State University. His PhD was in agriculture engineering and human-computer interaction from Iowa State University. Dr. Karki leads a strong research program in the area of sensing, machine vision, and agricultural robotics at the WSU Center for Precision and Automated Agricultural Systems. He has published widely in many journals, such as Journal of Field Robotics, among many others. And Dr. Karki was awarded the 2020 Real Bird Engineering Concept of the Year by the American Society of Agriculture and Biological Engineers. And today we're very excited to have him, and I'll just give you a bit of a context about the idea of this webinar. We all know the role of robotics and AI that has played a major role in increasing productivity in farming, as well as reducing labor use. So different technologies like modular automation, robotics technologies have created a conducive environment to develop and adopt like smart and technology-friendly farming mechanisms for the benefit of agriculture industries around the world. So in this presentation, our speaker will first discuss the importance of precision and automated robotic systems for the future of farming. And then he will summarize the past efforts and current status of agricultural automation and robotics, particularly for food crop production, followed by an introduction of the novel systems being developed in this program. And then we'll move on at the end to talk about where he will talk about the major challenges and opportunities in agriculture, robotics, and related areas, particularly in small scale farming, as well as potential future directions in research and development. I'll give the floor to Dr. Karki, but before that, I would like to just give you an update that we're going live on Facebook. So if anyone might be cut off from accessing our Zoom call or have any problem, you can always access our webinar through our live version on Facebook on our GIST page. And please post your questions and queries or any feedback on our chat box. Professor Karki, please, the floor is all yours. You can start the webinar presentation.
Thank you very much, Shreyasa, for your nice introduction and also introducing the institution and also briefing about the presentation today. And I would also like to thank GIS for giving this opportunity, specifically to Dovan Baini and Uttam Srestha sir for your kind invitation, and again this opportunity to share some of my thoughts around AI, robotics, and other modern technologies and its roles in agriculture. Particularly, again, I'll be focusing on some of the research projects that I'm working on around developing these technologies for fruit and vegetable crops. And then towards the end, as mentioned by Shreyasa, we'll be talking briefly about where we might be going in the future. So with that, let me share the screen here, and we might take a second or two to figure out everything looks okay. Give me just a couple of seconds here so that everything is visible. So could somebody make sure for me that you're seeing two individuals picking apples?
Yep.
Well, thank you. So for the audience, I would like to give 5 seconds or 10 seconds just to look at these two pictures that are here side by side, and then we'll begin. So again, my name is Manas Karki. I'm associate professor at Biological Systems Engineering and Center for Precision and Automated Agricultural Systems at Washington State University. Today I'll be talking briefly about AI and robotics in production agriculture. Before anything else, I would like to briefly talk about who we are and where we are. This is United States. Oftentimes I have to start here because for international audience, not always, but sometimes I have to differentiate that Washington, DC and the state of Washington are two different places, and they're actually located in the opposite two corners of the United States, one in the Atlantic coast here in Washington, DC, and Washington State right next to Vancouver, British Columbia is located in the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. This is our state. Seattle over here on our top left corner, and our Center for Precision and Automated Agricultural Systems is down here as a dot. Our central campus, Washington State University's Pullman campus, is located here, about 2.5 hours driving from where I am, which is the Center for Precision and Automated Agricultural Systems. Our center is located here strategically because all the crops that we work with are around the center, or basically it was created and installed in the place that would make strategic sense for working with different kinds of crops of importance for the state of Washington. Here are some of the important crops for the state: wine grapes, some of the dryland wheat and other crops, lentils and such. Washington produces about 65% of the total apple production in the United States. It is also a big producer of sweet cherries. About 60% of the sweet cherries every year comes from the state of Washington. So with that, let's briefly talk about what does AI and robotics do for us in agriculture, or what kind of roles they can play for us in agriculture. Capability to make and implement farming decisions with increasingly desirable outcomes over time is what we would like to do with these tools and techniques. And this is the capability leading us to what we call smart agriculture, smart farming, or sometimes also referred to as agriculture 4.0. Why? It is important to assist in producing more or better, rather more and better with less. When I say more and better, certainly that is related to yield, the quality of yield, the production. And by less, I mean all kinds of inputs that go with farming. But we need to be able to do it without compromising the potential for future generation to achieve the same, which is the part of sustainability. A lot of people and maybe audience here in this today's seminar are also working on. Sustainability becomes a big issue, something that we must care about so that what we do today doesn't impact the capability of our future generations to do the same. So to achieve these goals, artificial intelligence that include techniques such as for machine learning, including deep learning, expert systems and heuristics, and predictive modeling, to name a few techniques around artificial intelligence. These fundamental techniques would help us lead to technologies such as pattern recognition. For example, our finger printing recognition technique, facial recognition techniques. These pattern recognition techniques are a product of artificial intelligence. Machine vision system, different kinds of camera, image acquisition and image processing techniques that do a lot of things for us. Big data analytics, where we collect and combine all different kinds of data. That could be images, videos, weather data, many other kinds of point data, such as, for example, if it is agriculture, let's say nitrogen application, chemical application, all those kinds of data could be collected and could be analyzed together in a big data analytics framework. Decision support systems, the tools that help make certain decisions or help farmers, in this specific case, make certain decisions based on the data and the analytics that have been used. And robotics, this is another technology that relies heavily on artificial intelligence, and that can make a huge impact in what we do in agriculture. So these technologies lead to specific activities in farming. For example, perceiving or understanding plant conditions and environment where they are planted. These technologies could also assist us in doing better job in terms of making farming decisions, implementing those decisions, and analyzing the outcome of those decisions that we have made and implemented in farming. For example, we might be using this technology to detect certain kinds of pests early on and make decisions to apply certain chemicals or do some non-chemical pest control techniques. For example, when we're working in organic farming, and these farming decisions need to be implemented using certain kinds of robotic, automated, or even manual operations, such as applying certain chemicals, and then analyzing the outcome. After those, for example, in this case, applying certain chemicals to control pests, so we could go back and use AI related techniques to understand what happened. Did the control technology we use work or not? And those kinds of um, possibilities are there for us to be more effective, efficient, and um, timely in managing crops. Now, what does that mean in terms of farming, or where does that help? I already gave you an example of pest management, but there are many other examples, and pretty much everything we do in farming could benefit from these technologies and activities that are enabled by artificial intelligence. It includes water and nitrogen or nutrient management, to be more generic, canopy management, which involves keeping plants in healthy conditions in the shape that is desirable for larger production, in this condition that is desirable for using machines and things like that. Harvest and post-harvest operations. When is it time for harvesting? How much to harvest? What kind of produce to be harvested at this time? Where is the market? And things like that. So all of this helps us achieve the ideal precision ag goal of understanding and managing individual plant level variability. The long-term goal, I'll be repeating this again and again, long-term goal in this particular space is to manage individual plants to optimize the potential of those plants. In the past, what is happening, or currently yet what is happening, is that we are managing crops at a block level, at a plot level, acres, for example, where there is still a lot of uncertainty and variability involved, but because of the limitations of existing tools and techniques, and economic limitations, we tend to focus on plot level management. But in the future, we'd like to understand the variability of individual plants and apply or use or operate as desired for improving or optimizing the performance of individual plants, so that the overall product yield and quality can be maximized. So with that, let me go back to the history and briefly mention that agricultural mechanization was recognized as one of the most important engineering achievements of 20th century. That's because we developed and implemented many different kinds of technologies for farming, and certainly the level of adoption of these technologies vary around the world. It is not same as what is here in the US versus what is there in Nepal or India or other developing countries. But in general, around the world, we develop big machines to perform a lot of farming operations automatically or mechanically, that reduced the amount of labor used substantially and increased the the amount of farming we could do, increased the amount of crop that we produced and the quality of these crops that we're producing. For example, about 100 years ago, there were about 95% people involved in farming in the United States. Right now, it is less than 1% or around 1% of population working in farming. They're producing much more than what we could consume in the United States. Actually, United States is one of the biggest exporters of agricultural commodities. Back then, when I was coming to US from Nepal, I thought agriculture was not something that US would, agricultural commodities would not be something that US would export. I was only thinking about defense technologies or software technologies, such as we're using Microsoft Windows back then, for example, in 1990s, when I was going to college in Pulsuk. But what I mean to say is that it is not difficult to realize once you start to pay a little attention. US agricultural industry is huge, and it is a big export industry. For example, apples produced in the state of Washington are exported all over the world. And actually, I have even seen some of the Fuji apples produced in Washington, in Kathmandu. I don't know if they were actual Fuji apples. I didn't try them, or they were just labeled somewhere. But anyway, the bottom line, it has been exported everywhere, and these kinds of changes were possible because of the mechanization and automation technologies of the past century. Now, a few examples here. These kinds of tillage machines that can plow fields, thousands of acres every day by just one worker, replacing thousands of workers. Maybe the term replacing is not the best here, but again, minimizing the amount of labor that is used in farming. Big planters working in tandem or in collaboration with each other, like these. Boom sprayers to apply pest control chemicals in different kinds of crops. Row crops harvesters, such as corn harvesters, soybean harvesters, wheat harvesters like these ones, even sugarcane harvesters like these ones produced by John Deere, a company producing all kinds of agricultural equipment. In recent years, we have been also seeing more and more automated or robotic solutions being adopted in farming. One example is this one, what we call auto guidance techniques. Most of the tractors produced and sold around the world these days have this guidance technology using RTK GPS as a sensor, and some control and auto steering technologies that would allow these tractors to drive straight onto the desired straight line paths or any curved paths that are defined. Priority of this operation could be followed by these tractors very precisely, actually within a couple of centimeters, when we use these kinds of what we call RTK, or real-time kinematic GPS units. Certainly the GPS signals we have in our phones and some of the consumer devices do not have that kind of accuracy, which is sufficient for everything or many things we do in day-to-day life, for example, driving around the city and things like that. But in agriculture and many other high precision technologies that we use, RTK GPS becomes a vital tool like this one. However, whatever we have been developing and adopting so far have benefited only certain kinds of crops, such as corn and soybean and others, and particularly in the farming operations of a scale and the size that is necessary to be able to afford these technologies. So to going back to the two pictures we saw earlier at the beginning of this presentation, are presented here again, just to give us a sense of where we are still lacking the technologies that we believe, that I believe we shouldn't be the way we're doing it. We should actually have in my opinion, technology is already in place to cover some of these operations that we still are doing manually in farming. So for example, here on our left is a picture captured some 80 years ago, or 82 years ago, to be accurate, exact, over in Virginia. And one on our right is a picture captured a few years ago here in Washington by one of my students. Other than the one on our left being black and white, there is literally no difference in between these two operations, where we're harvesting apples using ladders and some bags carried by these workers on their front. They climb up and down the ladder while picking fruit, and they carry 15, 20 kg of this fruit on their backs, and while climbing up and down these ladders, and when it is full, they walk to a container bin and empty it. For that matter, since whenever we started knowing how to build ladders, picking fruit hasn't changed a lot. And I believe we can do better with the advanced artificial intelligence technologies, robotic technologies, um, higher computational and more powerful computational systems that we have uh, access to now, advanced sensor technologies. All these things have come together, in my opinion, with a very good integrated, a very good opportunity for developing integrated solutions to perform some of these field operations with machines. And that's where I believe, as engineer working in agriculture, have a big role to play, and that's where I'm focusing my efforts currently in terms of research and development, as well as education. Actually, it's not like I'm working in it and this is the area we've just started working on. There have been long research and development in developing robotic solutions for farming in the past, but with only limited commercial success. There are a few different limitations that have been on the way for wider commercial adoption. One of those is speed, accuracy, and robustness of these technologies, or their lack of those features. Another challenge has been produce or plant damage. Some of these technologies, and we'll see some examples in a little bit, can damage plant as well as produce to the extent they cannot be used anymore, and that's why these technologies are not widely adopted. Cost and lack of adoption, and as another part, farming is an industry that operates in a really thin margin, and therefore um, technologies we develop for farming has to be affordable. And even though we're talking about really sophisticated, complicated, complex robotic systems, sometimes I tend to argue that robotic apple picking is as difficult as landing on the Mars surface, um, because we have already achieved the former, I'm sorry, the latter, but we have not been able to economically pick apples using robots yet. Well, that kind of a lighter analogy for our consideration. But that said, because cost is a big factor, we cannot develop a machine costing millions of dollars like those in defense or space exploration and still be able to use them in farming. And that's why we have an extra dimension, a critical dimension when we work in agricultural robotics to make them cost effective and affordable. So to address some of the challenges, Washington State University Center for Precision and Automatic Agricultural Systems, or CPAAS, has developed a program around agricultural robotics. I lead this program, and we've been working on various technologies for different kinds of applications in fruit and vegetable production. One of the major areas for my research and development in the past 10 years or so have been um, apple and cherry harvesting technologies. We've been developing both what we call mass and robotic harvesting systems. By mass, what I mean is that we are using a machine to pick or harvest rather multiple fruit at a time, whereas robotic picking tend to indicate that we're using a system that has some sort of pick and place kind of mechanism. It targets one fruit at a time, picks it, and then brings it to a container. Different types of end effectors. End effectors are the mechanisms that engage with the fruit or plant in certain ways so that we could apply certain energy and motion to remove fruit from these trees and collect them using different kinds of catching mechanisms or different kinds of containers or conveyance system that we have been looking at. And also we are integrating all of these component technologies together into different kinds of robotic systems and evaluating those in both laboratory as well as field environments. Here is an example of automated cherry harvesting. We have advanced some mechanical harvesting technologies for sweet cherries. These are big machines applying some stacking forces onto target tree branches or trunks with desired frequency and amplitude. And in recent years, we have been also developing machine vision system to locate where the branches are in both day and nighttime conditions, even under the situation when fruit like those cherries and leaves are blocking the branches quite heavily. Our machine vision system can predict where these branches are, and based on that, we'll be using a robotic manipulator, a robotic arm, and a robotic hand to go grab those branches and then set them with desired frequency and amplitude. Another focus has been in the area of robotic apple harvesting. You can see in these videos here, one on our left is the research prototype we developed and advanced over several years at Washington State University. And in recent years, we're working with a company out of Israel called FF Robotics. And with this company, we're developing a machine that has a full-scale robotic picking machine that has 12 arms, 6 in one side, 6 in another. And these arms operate simultaneously using cameras that would find where these fruit are, and using optimal path planning technology that would precisely and optimally locate and provide target apples for individual arms, and they go pick those apples and collect them onto a container bin using a conveyance system. So anyway, this has been another major focus in our lab. In addition to robotic picking, we have also developed what we call targeted second catch harvesting system for apples. This video shows us a multi-layer staking and catching mechanism for apple harvesting. There's a quick slow motion that depicts what is happening. So this kind of robotic harvesting, this kind of what we call mass harvesting system has also been showing really good promise for picking certain kinds of apples and keeping them in a good quality for what we call fresh market consumption, like the ones that we buy in grocery stores and eat. There is another industry called what we call processing industry, where apples or any other kinds of fruit would be brought into converting into juices or jams or many other products that are of a byproduct or a processed product of these fruit crops. But Washington is a big fresh market industry, and our effort has been always to develop technologies for picking fruit that would be in a perfect shape for fresh market consumption. Processing market is tolerable to some extent to some kind of some level of damage, such as bruising and cuts, because they would be crossed into a processed food or products. So technology could be a little bit more rough compared to what we are developing for fresh market industry. In addition to harvesting efforts, we're also looking at automated canopy and crop load management technologies. When I say canopy and crop load management, for those who would not have as much background in fruit crop farming, just want to take 30 seconds and say this. Trees that are grown in commercial farms are very much trained to the shape and size and the structure that we would like to develop them into. They're not let grow in any directions. They're not let go in any height or any size. We keep them using genetics, breeding, some horticultural technologies, as well as pruning and thinning and training. We keep them in a very small, short, narrow canopy structures so that we can maximize the fruit production compared to vegetative growth or growth of the plant material. And also we want to develop canopies in that fashion so that machines could have access to branch and fruit for robotic operations. We also like to do those kinds of what we call cultural practices so that there is more penetration of light into the canopies. There is more circulation of air through the canopies so that these canopies remain healthy and the fruit we produce would be of higher quality. So for those objectives or the goals to be achieved, every year branches of these trees, apples or cherries or other fruit trees are tied to a trellis wire, a wire that runs through the orchards. And every year, some number of older, unproductive branches, diseased branches are removed. And then every year, some flowers are removed before they are pollinated. And also, there are technologies being developed for artificially pollinating these flowers so that we don't have to rely on biological pollination process that relies on honeybees, which are declining around the world. And also we remove some of the fruitlets that are growing in the trees so that we keep only desired number of fruit, and uh, so that we support what we call, or we minimize what we call biennial bearing and provide or produce the type of crop, the quality and the yield desirable for fresh market consumption. All these operations are currently manual, and we are developing robotic solutions to perform these operations again with minimal human involvement. These all robotic solutions require a machine vision system to understand the environment, formulate rules and guidelines for robotic operations, and it requires a robotic system to go perform those operations. And these all tools and techniques or component mechanisms rely heavily on artificial intelligence techniques such as expert system and deep learning and machine vision image processing techniques that we discussed earlier in making these kinds of technologies happen. Here is an example of robotic pruning. Pruning is an operation again to selectively remove a few branches from these trees every year so that we keep them healthy and productive. We have used stereo vision cameras and a robotic system, a manipulator and an effector to find these branches and automatically getting to those branches and cutting them off. This is a video that we recorded in our lab experiment with this robotic pruning system. In the last month or so, we went to the field actually with this robotic system for experiments in the field. As you all know, perhaps, as we all know, we always face various challenges as we go from lab to the field. We were not as successful as we would like to be in this first trial in the field experiment, but we learned quite a bit, and we'll be going back to the field again in a couple of months to perform another round of robotic pruning in the field environment. Another crop that we have been looking at is what we call red raspberries. For some of us who do not know what this crop is, it is actually ऐसेलु. हाम्रो गाउँघरतिर त्यो छारीमा फल्ने ऐसेलु नै हो, But this is produced in a commercial fashion in the state of Washington and around the world. It is also trained very strictly into a vertical structure. And every year, older canes are found, located, and selectively removed so that new canes would stay and they produce larger amount of good quality fruit. And do we see the slide again?
Yep.
Yes, we do.
So in this red raspberry crop, every year we have to manually find the older branches, remove them, and then the remaining branches are brought together and tied together to create firm upright canopies. And we have developed a robotic solution to perform this operation using a camera system that would find where these branches are, where these canes are, and then tie a tape around them. We have been also working on automating a few operations in vineyards producing grapes. One of those operations is what we call green shoot thinning, which is an operation to remove a part of the new growth in these vines so that we can keep the amount of crop to a level that can be of the quality required by wineries or juice producing companies or any other post-processing operations. So to remove a part of these new shoots, there are mechanical systems that go next to these canopies and apply some brushes to remove, again, a certain portion of these new shoots. Because we cannot see where the trunk or this horizontal structure, we also call them cordons. We don't know where they are in these kinds of canopies. When we need to remove some of these shoots, it is very difficult for operators to precisely locate the rollers or the brushes to remove some of these shoots. And that's why we're developing a machine vision system that would specifically look at these canopies and find out where the trunks are. And then we're developing a control system that would go precisely, that would bring the brushes precisely against these horizontal structures so that we can remove the amount of green shoot that we would like to remove. Another robotic project that we are working on is to develop a small modular robotic system for identifying and killing weed. It could be removed using mechanical systems or precision chemical application. In this case, as we can see on our top right corner, a precision chemical application system has been developed that would spray a little bit of chemical herbicide, for example, in this case, is on top of the weed that we would like to kill while keeping the plant of interest, our crop plants, safe. Another project we've been working on is to use unmanned aerial systems or UAS for bird deterrence. And in this particular project, we're using what is called a Matrix 600 DJI drone, and also EV, another drone from a company here, I think in Colorado. These systems are flown above wine grapes, blueberries, and some other crops to see how effectively we could chase away birds so that the damage caused by those birds would be minimal in these fruits. We can see in the bar chart here on our right, number of birds per hour with and without the flights of these drones have been um, significantly different, actually 3 to 4-fold difference, sometimes even larger difference between when we fly these drones versus when we don't. And that shows a very effective tool being developed here. We recently completed another development to automate this operation so that an operator would not have to be there. The drone would go find where the birds are and fly to the direction of those birds, or actually intercept if they are trying to come into or fly into the fields. And again, this has been showing great promises, and we're making it completely automated in our research program. Smart irrigation is another focus area for our research program. In this specific example, our effort has been to collect all kinds of data and use big data framework to analyze them effectively and efficiently. In this case, we would have point data, as I mentioned earlier, um, point data, image data, temporal data, meaning data collected over time, such as weather. All those kinds of data would be collected together into a framework where um, big data analytic technique that uses deep learning again to analyze this heterogeneous collection of data and provide a decision support system that would help farmer to apply right amount of water at right time at right location. We are doing similar project for nitrogen application. I don't have to repeat this same thing, but we'll be collecting many different kinds of parameters to identify or to estimate the needs of individual plants and apply right amount of nitrogen at right time at right location. Another focus area in recent years have been to develop a mobile device-based solution for farming. Various different kinds of tools could be developed using mobile machine vision system, using the cameras and other kinds of sensors that are available in these mobile devices, including cell phones. One example is counting apples and estimating crop load that farmers could expect from a given field. We're also doing the same thing in wine grapes to estimate the number of clusters and number of berries in wine grapes, as you can see in these pictures. And we're also developing a solution for distinguishing viral disease from non-viral mechanical damage or other stresses these vines face every year. And we would like to differentiate viral symptoms from those because if it is a viral symptoms, the vine needs to be removed or otherwise treated very precisely and timely in timely fashion, so that the viral disease does not transmit to other plants around. So with that, the summary in a way of the research project that I've been leading is ended. And next couple of minutes, I would like to talk about potential future direction. But I would like to check the time. How long or how many more minutes may I have?
Maybe 5 minutes. Or if you can take more if you want, but our designated time is 1 hour, but you can take more if you want.
Sure. Okay. Let's see. Maybe between 5 to 10 minutes is what I think it will take. Um, we have been looking at and developing mechanization solutions for long in farming. Those that replaced, for example, a lot of human and animal and other powers used in farming. Not everywhere. Certainly, my brother in Bhojpur still uses गोरुले जोत्ने काम is still continuing. म आफै पनि पोहोर परार साल जाँदाखेरि गोरुले खेत जोतेरै आएको. Sir, अरू धेरै अब भनौँ न larger scale farming in the areas where we have in the continents where we have large scale farmings, animal power has been completely removed by mechanical systems, for example. And in recent years, we have been adding automation and robotic solutions on top of the mechanization solutions developed in the past. And at the same time, we're developing precision management tools like the ones we discussed about precision irrigation or smart irrigation, precision nitrogen management, and things like that. All these technologies go hand in hand together, building a system of tools and techniques to achieve what we call the goal of smart or intelligent agriculture. So there are a few different specific areas for research and development I believe would be important in the future. But before that, let me briefly mention some of the thoughts I have around the challenges and opportunities for small scale farming. Most of the things I talked about right now so far have been around the technologies that were developed for relatively larger farming operations, because that's what we are given here in the United States. But that doesn't mean that the context and the visibility, potential for adoption, these technologies is limited to just these large scale farms. I'll be discussing in the next couple of slides how it might be useful in the situations we face at home in Nepal and other similar countries around the world. What do we face there? Again, the audience here perhaps knows a lot of these things better than me. I have left Nepal, I don't know, about 15, 16 years ago. I grew up in a farm. I knew a lot of things about farming, but the engagement of my profession into farming in our countries have been like zero or almost non-existent in the last 15 years. So I might have missed a lot of context around what I'll be talking in the next couple of slides. But I believe we face these constraints such as conventional crops and cropping practices. Like canopy management system that I discussed may not be very well conducted, and the crop varieties that we plant may be still those traditional ones which have their own values, for example, Marsi rice. But there are varieties that might be more productive and in some cases more nutritious that we might have to look into. Difficult field terrains, such as the ones that we see in this picture here. We have a lot of high slope terraced farming in Nepal that is a challenge. Land fragmentation, farm size is another challenge. Labor migration, it's a challenge around the world. Nepal, because of the migration, US, we don't have anybody working in farms. We have to bring people from other countries. So this is a challenge around the world in terms of finding enough labor. Limited availability and higher cost of farming resources such as irrigation, fertilizer, labor, and power. For example, per unit cost of electricity in the state I live is perhaps even cheaper than per unit cost of electricity in Nepal. I'm not converting dollar into rupees. We pay about 9 cents a unit, which is maybe 10, 11 rupees a unit in Nepal. I'm guessing electricity cost in Nepal is perhaps more than that right now. Anyway, these are the challenges we face because if we don't have affordable electricity or the power, we are limited in terms of what we could do in farming. What are the opportunities? Productivity and farm gate value. When there is a time in some other settings, I'll talk briefly. I can talk about a few things about productivity, but one quick example: 1 acre of apples in the state of Washington, which is about 8 ropani of the field. 8 ropanis of the field in the United States provides about $100,000 to the farmer as a gross income, certainly, which is around $8,000, $5,000 to $8,000 in the similarly situated similar field conditions in Mustang or Manang. So 20 times difference in the farm gate value. I think there is a big room for improvement. Breeding of the varieties, management of the crop, those are the things I think important. Biology versus technology. In the past, we've been talking about we do certain biological stuff. We don't care how the technology is changing the world, how they could be applicable. As engineers, we tend to think that technology solves everything. We don't care about the biological side of the crops. I think those days are gone. I think it's the time we join hands, biological scientists, physical scientists, socioeconomic scientists, all kinds of disciplines need to come together to develop solutions that would optimize and solve these challenges that we face. Wider research and extension services and access to an efficient use of farming resources such as water, labor. I think there are opportunities in those areas, such as providing irrigation water to all kinds of farms. Increasingly affordable technologies is another opportunity. I think cost of the computational systems, cost of sensors, cost of even technologies such as drones are coming down to the extent that it is applicable to farming in Nepali context as well as many other countries around the world with a small subsistence farming. Technology modularity is another emerging trend. We're not now, at least the trend is not to produce or manufacture bigger machines. It's more towards developing smaller robotic systems so that small farmers could use a couple of those, and the large farmers could buy hundreds, maybe thousands of those, and have them work together. So that's the direction I think is helpful in the future. There are a couple of ways for technology adoption in small scale farming, like the one in our country. Cooperatives and neighbor networks. We could join hands in small units, like 10 farmers working together, or cooperatives set up by these farmers and renting or buying a tractor and sharing among the farmers could be one example. Identification and adoption of applicable and affordable technologies such as drones. I think $50,000 DJI Phantom 4 could do a lot of things these days in farming. Novel solutions. For example, developing a low-cost automated solution for running Hathi tractor in hillside farming in Nepal, for example, could be another area of novel solutions that we could be developing. Another important attributes of automated robotic farming is that it is the discipline that it is the area, it is the technology that can attract young generation to farming. A lot of people, perhaps some of us even in the audience, might think that agriculture is a profession that is not as attractive as, for example, computer science or electrical engineering or law or maybe medicine. However, I believe with robotics and smart farming, with all the things that we discussed in this presentation so far, I believe we can attract young generation into farming, and that's a big deal for the future of the farming. Another aspect to look at would be knowledge and technology sharing. I would like to use the term sharing, not transfer. A lot of people use the term technology transfer. I don't believe in transferring technology or the knowledge from one part of the world to another. This is common sharing and understanding and learning from each other. We know certain things in the West, and there is a lot of knowledge and existing technologies that needs to be shared with the global community so that we can learn from the experience of East and West, North and South, and develop solutions that would be helpful for the farmers around the world. Summary schools might be helpful, short courses. These days we could do even like this. We could do some summary schools and short courses. Research and educational collaborations help critically assess proposals and products. I think one thing that researchers from the West could potentially offer, and certainly a lot of the new researchers in Nepal are also capable of doing that. But because we have been dealing with competitive funding mechanisms here in the US and around the world, we might be able to assess proposals quite critically to help researchers in Nepal improve their proposals and improve the chances for competitive success. Mentoring entrepreneurs and startups would be another direction. Other opportunities at global scale, those are the ones that I kind of summarized for the local context, context of Nepal. In the global scale, we continue to exploit systems approach. I already mentioned about that, artificial intelligence, cyber physical systems, Internet of Things, big data, and all these technologies need to, and the disciplines need to work together to build solutions that are affordable, that are robust, accurate, and efficient for farming. Socioeconomic analysis becomes a very critical component of technologies we develop for farming because it can change the farming entirely, and that has a big impact on the socioeconomic structures of these communities. Optimizing cost and robustness becomes another key, where speed becomes a vital component, and multi-purpose machine, developing robotic solutions that can do many things um, by one machine, by simply changing one little part that would do, for example, things differently. If it is a robotic system that is designed for harvesting, pruning, thinning, pollination, maybe we just change the hand, all the body and the arm remains the same, and that becomes a solution that might be more affordable than a standalone dedicated machine. Data versus information. We'd like to convert data into information. That's because data is not in itself useful for farmers to do anything about it. We want to focus on developing algorithms and techniques that brings in all kinds of data into a framework that generates useful information, such as the decision support system, the help for farmers to make certain decisions without looking at those data and trying to make sense of those data by the farmers themselves. Connectivity and integration is another big area for research and development in the future. We need connectivity in farmlands around the world so that we could use cloud computing, edge computing, things like that in more efficient way to make all these things happen, like the ones that we discussed today. I already mentioned about big data approaches when I talked about the smart farming or smart irrigation or precision nitrogen application. I talked about collecting all kinds of data, putting them together into a framework where a heterogeneous kind of data could be analyzed together into developing a decision support system that can help farmers. This is where big data approaches can help a lot in the future for farming. I talked about plant level management a whole lot. I don't want to spend time there. This is my last slide. I believe Agriculture Control Center is the concept that I am promoting as a philosophy and the direction for the future. I believe future farming would be something like flying drones over Afghanistan, sitting in a room in Phoenix, Arizona. I think there are technologies available to do the same in farming. We could drive a tractor, we could fly a drone, we could let a robotic harvester run in the field by itself while operators, supervisors, managers supervising those from a remote location, a good office where they're safe and happy and productive. With that, thank you very much, everybody. This is my team over the last several years. I'm really privileged to have very novel, innovative, intellectual, and self-driven group of students and researchers and postdoctoral scholars working with me in this past 10 years. Really appreciate the efforts of these folks. And a lot of institutions providing research dollars without which we would not be able to do anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Karki, for your presentation. It was really great. Topic of presentation, ma automation robotics. Let's say not only it helps to make decisions, but analyze outcomes and optimize farming. भनेर एउटा holistic way मा presentation दिनुभयो, एकदमै राम्रो लाग्यो. Coming from social science background, मैले चाहिँ धेरै learn गर्न पाएँ. And I hope it was likewise for our participants as well. Should we open the floor for some question answer round, or I'm not sure given the time?
I think you can do that, Shreya.
Okay.
So because we only allocated 1 hour based on our speaker's time constraint, but if our speaker is allowing us to have more time, I think you can go ahead and take that opportunity.
I'd be more than happy to stay a little bit longer. Certainly, I might have taken a little bit longer than an hour. But again, I'm here if there are any questions.
Yeah. Seems like we don't have questions in Facebook.
So हामी यही भागोमा पनि क्वेसन गर्न सकिन्छ हैन, हामी among the participants ले we can type or question होला ए यहाँ रहेछ.
Bibik Chile सोध्नु भएको छ. Was curious to know.
म पढिरहेको छु त्यो. Thank you, Vivekji, for that important question. I think we discussed quite a bit around how AI might help us be effective, efficient, and sustainable in farming, and perhaps food security goes along with that quite nicely. I think I could add one thing about food security. I think we waste about 30 to 35% of everything we grow around the world in between where it is grown and when we consume them, during transportation, during storage, during retail shops, and even in our own refrigerators, we waste a lot of agricultural products. And I think AI, for example, blockchain technology and some other technologies can help us do better job in terms of demand and supply, in terms of tracking where the products are going, in terms of making sure these products are safe and secure, to improve the marketing side of the business as well, for farmers, so that it is not being mistaken to a product coming from a different place. Again, anyway, there are a lot of opportunities around how we can improve the safe and efficient and lossless or effective distribution of food and enhance food security through the use of AI and other technologies such as blockchain in the future. Going back to your question about agriculture 4.0, briefly speaking, agriculture 1, 2, and 3 involves going from human to animal into the machines, and then from machines to more automated machines, and then to those that are even autonomous. And then that's where agriculture 3.0 ends, and agriculture 4.0 is the place where all kinds of data and decision making and implementation of those decisions, and even supervision of the field operations after certain activities occur, and over time even refinement of these technologies to perform better over time is what agriculture 4.0 entails. So I think in Nepal, in some contexts, we're still using animal power. So we are still in agriculture 1.0 or even lower. In some cases, we're in agriculture 2.0, very rarely in agriculture 3.0. I think that's where we can make an impact right now. And certainly as the world goes towards agriculture 4.0, I believe it will be in an opportunity for Nepal to advance very quickly, and all the countries around the world, developing countries, would have an opportunity to advance rather quickly to that level, because technologies are rather facilitating and sometimes as equally applicable to small scale and subsistence farming. And that's why I think there is an opportunity. It's almost like, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's almost like before we had landlines, we went to mobile phones and all around the country, right? I hope, and I see some trajectories there. Agriculture might also see that kind of transformation, skipping agriculture 3.0 and potentially going to agriculture 4.0 directly at some point in the future. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what I think.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I agree. It's called latecomer advantage because we never gone through that brick phone. We used iPhone immediately when it released in California.
So Anand, thank you very much. Another question looks like is around the affordability. How affordable can AI be in the context of Nepal? AI in its core is a soft technology, an algorithm. As long as we have a $1,000 NVIDIA card, we should be able to do anything and everything I think MIT researcher would be able to do in terms of AI-based research. It might sound like a overstatement to some of us, but I believe on it. Because again, that's also why I said what I said earlier, that we have a potential to make an impact and jump into newer industry without going through the one in between. So anyway, AI in itself is not going to be expensive compared to what we do here in the US. It could be even more affordable because we have relatively cheaper scientists and engineers working in Nepal compared to same kind of experts working in the US. So there might be an advantage actually to develop and advance AI solutions in Nepal. I mean, that's true for everything, and that's true for agriculture as well when it comes to AI, in my opinion. Well, hope that makes sense. Next is, I really like the distinction of technology transfer versus technology sharing. What are the current constraints of sharing technology developed at a lab in Washington? So technology adoption is another potential terminology we might want to introduce. Not everything we do in one context is directly transferable to another. That is more true with the hardware solutions. We need to go through what we call contextual applied research to understand the needs and adopt the solutions that are applicable to the context at hand. And I think that's where Nepali researchers and funding agencies should focus on, at least to begin with. Certainly, fundamental revolutionary research is the key for the development for any country, and and this and other institutions being created in recent years are focusing heavily on those, and I really appreciate those efforts. But I think we could also look at more applied research for adopting innovations developed in other countries. It's not copying technology. It's not repeating what has been done. So for example, I have developed a robotic solution for robotic weeding in vegetable farms. The technology used is like $10,000 on top of that vehicle. But for Hathe tractor, that cost, I don't know, 100,000 rupees, 1 lakh रुपैयाँ. 1 लाख रुपैयाँको हाते ट्र्याक्टरमा 10 लाखको 15 लाखको टेक्नोलोजी हाल्न त मिलेन, त्यो एफोर्डेबल पनि भएन. तर मेरो विचारमा there are ways, there are opportunities with low cost sensors and AI solutions that are really can be really cheap or affordable. I think we could develop a practical solution for automating these Hathe tractors for the hillside operations in Nepal, but it requires contextual applied research in Nepal. I'm trying to link with the unemployment rate and use of AI in agriculture. If the AI removes need of labor in Nepal and also in Gulf countries, what do you think will this have on the impact of employment rate in Nepal and elsewhere? Great question. I was expecting this. It eventually came. This has a few dimensions. One of those is very philosophical. If it were not for the mechanization and automation solutions developed for farming, I would potentially still be digging potatoes for tonight's dinner, rather than spending my time going through schools and putting my efforts into creative, novel solutions that led us to where we are today. I think reducing laborious manual work in the short term creates some challenges for employment, but in the long term, that's a great opportunity for human civilization to focus on things that matter more. That's the philosophical side of it. Practical side of it is that we are developing solutions to fill the gap of not having enough labor, not to replace the ones we have. That is true, I think, to an extent acceptable for a lot of people around the world. Even in our own country, a lot of fields in the country are left barren because our young generation have migrated to commercial, industrial, as well as foreign employment activities rather than working in the agricultural sector. Next is that reducing employment in agriculture, direct manual labor in agriculture, doesn't mean it is end of the story. We generate a lot of employment opportunities in manufacturing those machines, supervising those machines, operating those machines, high pay, safer jobs than what agricultural labor would be. Still, there would be government and non-government agencies' roles in retraining and creating other kinds of job opportunities. I'm not ruling that out, but I think in general, it will be a positive thing to do.
May I ask one question? Thank you so much, Professor Karki, for your insightful presentation, and you have connected, cutting edge technologies with your experience in your home and childhood. It's brilliant. And just one question. You mentioned that the technology that you have shown can be used for pollination as a substitute, right? Then normally, the pollination is carried out by insects in nature. So globally, and I'm working in that field in ecosystem services like pollinations. And my question is, so if we build substitute what nature provide us freely, and if we provide that in a cheaper cost, and doesn't that incentivize the negative or extractive practices which we have done to the nature in the past, and that has caused like the pollination collapse, or the collapse of the bee colonies and those things. What is your take on that? So of course there is a double-edged sword, but what is your take on that?
Thank you very much. That's really a thoughtful question there. There is existing debate actually in the community between trying to make pollinators like insects, bees, and their health better versus moving towards mechanical pollination. In the animal industry, we have long been using artificial insemination. We use bulls and extract sperms, and we use artificial ways to fertilize. And again, I'm not a biologist or naturalist or conservation expert, but I think there are competing directions scientists are looking at. I think the end goal in the vision should be a sustainable world.
That's right.
And if in any way moving to mechanical pollination would deteriorate health, environmental health in certain ways, for example, natural pollinators may not get as much opportunity. I don't know if we are doing things manually or mechanically. There might be some other approaches that we need to come up with to address those challenges. It's more like US built hundreds and hundreds of dams to produce electricity and provide irrigation water in the past 100 years. But it did a lot of negative impact to, for example, salmons and other animals or other aspects of environment. And later they realized that and started to build passageways and in other ways improve the structure so that the negative impact to the environment would be minimal. I think what I'm looking at is more the exploratory research to show the promise, to validate that the technology works. There is a justification behind it because, as you mentioned, there is a huge challenge in finding enough bees due to the beehive collapse phenomenon that's happening around the world. And farmers are risking their crops in this high-value crop industry, and alternative pollination technologies are of really critical importance to these industries. And that's why I think it makes sense to explore those technologies. It becomes viable, but then comes with some negative impact to the environment and the balance that we live in. I think we have to then also be mindful of how to minimize that impact and how to counter that impact through other techniques. I don't know if it makes sense, but that's what I think. Well, thank you, everybody. It's getting relatively late here. I really enjoyed being with all of you and sharing some of the thoughts I have around automation and robotics in agriculture. I'd always be happy to have further discussion. My email could be shared through this, I guess, to the audience. If you'd like to contact me in any way, I can be reached via Facebook or any other social media platforms as well. Open door policy. Anything and everything is welcome as long as it is relevant and keeps us moving forward. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Professor Karki. On behalf of GIS, I would like to thank you for your time and your valuable presentation, and we hope to collaborate with you in the future as well. And I would also like to thank our GIS members for their help in organizing this webinar, Uttamji, Dovanji, and Sanjeevji, and all the GIS members. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Hi, thank you, Manoji. Sanjeev,
Thank you.
light on of Florence.
Yep.